where the waves have crashed. All right, so the next step we're going to do is I always start with my yellows first. The reason I start with yellow first on my watercolors, because yellow gets dirty so quickly. So I'm going to start dropping in some water into my palette, just about a drop per each, and that lets it saturate, which means it basically is getting wet. It'll make it easier for you to pull the paint out. You obviously cannot pull paint out of a dry pan. It doesn't work like that. You have to wet it down first. So I've got my paper towels all ready in case when I wash my brush, and for in the case that something spills. Always have the paper towels. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my yellow first. And I do not recommend having your paints on top of your painting. If you're right-handed, again, if you're right-handed, you want to have your paints and water on your right side. If you're left-handed, put it on the left side, so that way you're not drawing everything back and forth over your painting. Let me go ahead and go with my yellow here. And I am going to wet down my sand up to that yellow line. This is basically nothing more than using watercolor paint on watercolor paper to color in a crayon drawing that you've just made. You've made your own crayon coloring page on what is called watercolor paper. Watercolor paper is thicker, so the water doesn't get through it as easily. It doesn't end up making it all ripply and wobbly paper. If you do this on regular printer copy paper that we usually have for things like homework assignments and things, you will see that it does get a lot more messy. All right, so this is just coloring a little bit more. The darker the color, the more color on the brush is called richer color saturation. Saturating is something as to make it wet. But in this case, color saturation is also refers to how rich the color is. So something light colored versus more color. Putting a little more color on here. I'm going to go ahead and do my sun now. Up here. It's also yellow. All right, so I'm done with my yellow here. And I want to start doing my sunset. So usually when you have a sunset, you start with yellows and then oranges, reds. Sometimes you can even throw in a little pinkish purpley color. In this case, we are using the Color Swell art palette because that was something that was easy to obtain in a large enough quantity for our lessons. Without actually, and it has a much nicer brush than the Crayola pens do. Start doing our sunset. We're going to make it very wet first. We're going to wet this down a lot. Put lots of water on here. You notice I have a cardboard backing. That's nothing more than an empty thing of pizza container from a frozen pizza aisle. Okay, now that I've made, that's just clear, looks like clear water because that's what it is. And I'm going to start adding clear, wet background. I'm going to add color in. Now you notice that the sun in the center, I want to be a darker yellow, which is why I did not wet my sun down first. I didn't wet down the sun part first. I'm going to add some more clear water now to the edges here. I don't want to have a hard line. I want to make a nice clear edge. Clear edge. You notice how that yellow gets thinner looking and thinner looking as I get farther and farther away by adding more and more clear water. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the orange color and start dropping that in there. You see how you can just drop it in? Or you can also just blend that as well. You do your best to try not to have a strong one color line. Again, you can see where I'm just kind of blending and blending and blending. Let me get a little bit of clean water on my brush so that way I can kind of overlap these two. You'll notice it smears, kind of blends it together a little bit better. If I just, after I do the orange and yellow, I just kind of mix in a little bit of the yellow and the orange against each other. It sort of just blends together. So let me go back over here and start blending in some orange on the other side. there's a little bit of red I can add in, but I want to also first make that whole sky a little bit wet. Actually, what I first want to do is I want to make an outline here for a lighthouse. This basically looks like a tall pointy triangle with a rectangle, a square, and a triangle. That's my lighthouse. Just that easy. You can see it up close here. Back to the sunset. So, going to go ahead and add in that little bit of red color off into the distance here, because the sun is setting and it's starting to turn into a night sky in the distance. Gonna get more of this color. There's my red again. I want to try not to run into my crayon lighthouse. But if you do have some open sky on the other side, do your best to try to fill that in. I'm going to wipe off some of the extra red off my paintbrush. And now I'm just going to blend in those edges with clean water. Just simple, no paint on my water, on my brush. And just kind of blend those colors. And if you say to yourself, wait, that section doesn't look orange or red, I'll just go ahead and pick up a little, some water on my brush, a little bit of that orange. I'm going to drop that in there, fill that in. And now I'm just going to, again, use a clean brush, rinse it off in your cup and just kind of tap that color so it blends in together. I want to go back to that side over here. Same thing. It needs a little bit more orange to it. Watercolors usually don't get done all in one complete sitting. Most people you'll find will go back to it time after time again, and they will add layers. So once this dries, you can add another layer to it. But this is not going to happen in this lesson. That could be always a later lesson for another grade. So I'll go ahead and kind of give it a little bit of texture. Maybe there's some haze or some fog in the distance. If you accidentally make a mistake, I like to follow the Bob Ross school of there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. I've had students who say, oh my goodness, it was great, and then I dropped something there. And then paint like a bird shape over that thing you made the mistake with. It tends to make you feel a lot better when you can hide your mistakes as clouds or as birds or maybe a little tree or something like that in the front to block it. But a lot of the times I've had someone drop their blue paint that we're doing next over the sky, and all of a sudden they're like, it's destroyed. Nope, it's a bird now. There's no mistake. It's a bird. So I'm now washed off my brush completely. You can see I haven't really used that much of my water. By starting with yellow and changing colors down the line from yellow to orange to red like we would have on the color wheel, I don't have a lot of mess. I do have the cat.